This is Chthonia, the world of the dark feminine. Hello and welcome to Chthonia, the podcast dealing with the dark feminine. I'm your host, Breechberg, and in this particular episode of Chthonia, we're going to do the second of our two Hindu deities for 2021, and that is a deity known as Shivaduti. Now, Shivaduti is interpreted in different ways. There are a couple of stories about her. But what you will find if you go and look these stories up for yourself is that these stories often, you will see, you won't always see the name of Shivaduti mentioned in these stories. However, in other versions and other translations, her name does actually appear. And she's often, what's the word I'm looking for? She's often, I'm not going to say confused with, because that's not entirely correct, but she's conflated with Kali and with Durga and with these other matrikas, other manifestations. Technically, she is a matrika. And when I say that, I don't mean we talked about the Ashtamatrikas or the Septamatrikas, the 7 or 8 Shaktis or mothers who are in the battle against the what you would call the demons of the ego, against Shumba and Nishumba, Mahisasura, Chunda and Munda. All of these demons that that create this great battle after they have subdued the gods and taken over the 3 worlds. And there's different varieties of this story. You see this cycle repeat itself, where you have a demon who becomes very powerful, and you have this Shakti energy that ends up taking the demon down, severing its head or just otherwise battling it and becoming victorious. So again, Shivaduti is not always explicitly mentioned, but in certain versions of the stories about her, she is the goddess who appears. She is the one. She's there, even though you don't necessarily see her by name. So, and you'll see what I mean as I get into these stories. Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about is, who is she specifically? So she's a manifestation of Shakti. She appears during the battle between against the demons Shumba and Nishumba. And as it said here, from the goddess Kushiki, there appeared a divine light, which took the shape of goddess Shivaduti. She was completely wild and yelping like 100 jackals. She's given the task of asking Lord Shiva to carry a message to the demons that if they didn't back down, they would be devoured by her jackals. Now, according to the Kalika Purana, goddess Shivaduti is described as having a dark complexion, with long matted hair, 3 eyes, holding a scimitar, while her right foot rests on the back of a jackal, and her left foot tramples the corpse of a demon. She possesses 10 incarnations or yoginis. Okay, so that's the other thing is, we're talking about her as a matrika, but she is also a yogini. And again, you'll see there's not necessarily a difference, it's semantics. There's not necessarily a difference between those. It's only a matter of how they're categorized and understood. And the 10 yoginis she's associated with are Shamenkari, Shanta, Devamata, Mahodari, Karali, Kamada, Bhagasaya, Bhagamalani, Bhagavaha, and Subhaga. Those are the yoginis associated with Shivaduti. And we will also discuss what a yogini is, because there's a couple different definitions of yogini. So, but what I want to do here, so my little outline for today's episode, first I want to talk about the 2 stories that she's specifically mentioned and she appears, at least in certain versions. And the first one is going to be the story of Andaka, and the second one is the story of the battle of Nishumba, and I'm going to read it from the Chandipat, from the translation that I have here. Then I'm going to talk a little about the yoginis, and I'm going to talk about Shivaduti's relationship to the jackal and the importance of that. So that's going to be about the extent of it. Like a lot of these figures that I've talked about, they're mentioned in different places. They have a certain symbolism and a certain role. and a certain energy if they're invoked, certainly. But they're not always, there's not always a long, extensive narratives. For example, Kali, there are many, many, many narratives. You'll see long, extensive ones. And sometimes these goddesses, Kali or Parvati, the name is changed to that when they're actually referring to one of these more specific deities. But Shivaduti mainly has this kind of messenger aspect. So first I want to talk about the Andaka Asura. Okay, so let me bring up my note on that. Okay. So Andaka literally means he who darkens. And the basic story of Andaka, it says his story finds mentions in various Hindu texts. I've been reading a little bit from Wikipedia here, the pieces that I think are correct and relevant. You mention the various places that Andaka's story appears, so there are some variations. But in the Shiva Purana, this is the basic story. When Shiva was meditating on Mount Mandara, Parvati was in a playful mood and covered Shiva's eyes. This caused the whole universe to become covered in darkness. The sweat that oozed out of Parvati's hands due to touching Shiva fell to the ground and created a horrible-looking blind boy. Parvati was terrified on seeing him, but Shiva rebuked her, claiming that since he was born due to their physical contact, he was their child. When the demon king Hiranyaksha performed penance to please Shiva in order to beget a child, Shiva gifted the boy to him and named him Andaka due to his blindness. Okay, so that's the connection between darkness and blindness. And I'm just going to pause for a moment to remind you how in mythology throughout the world, blindness sometimes is also associated with prophecy or inner vision. Not necessarily the case here. But in this case, blindness has more to do with sheer ignorance. Okay. After Hiranyaksha's death by Vishnu, Andaka became the new king, but was not regarded as an Asura since he was born of the Devas. Disowned by the majority of his clan, he performed a severe penance to please Brahma. Brahma thus appeared to him and offered him a boon. Andaka requested that Brahma give and make divine vision and immortality, presumably for him. And there's divine vision, by the way, as I was just saying about blindness. He's asking for this from Brahma. Brahma granted Andaka these wishes, but warned him that he could still be killed by Shiva. Andaka went back to his kingdom and subdued all his opponents as well as the Devas. Andaka asked his minister if there was anyone who could match him in strength, majesty, and riches. The minister informed him that he did not have the company of a beautiful woman. The world's most beautiful woman, he explained, was Parvati, who belonged to a matted ascetic who lived on Mount Kailasha. Kailasha, I'm saying it wrong. Andaka was advised that if he wished to be truly matchless, he should possess her. Andaka sent a messenger to Shiva with the demand to hand over his wife. Andaka attacked Shiva with his greatest warriors, but they were defeated by Shiva's army. One day, when Shiva and his Ganas were away, Andaka found Parvati alone. She resisted Andaka's advances, but when she found him to be too overwhelming, she requested aid from the gods. The battle went on for many years, and when Shiva found out about this, he declared a truce. Many attempts were made for a peaceful resolution, but Andaka insisted on acquiring Parvati. He renewed the assault, and his trusted general Bali single-handedly defeated all the gods and swallowed them. Shiva fired powerful weapons at Bali, which forced him to disgorge all the gods. In retaliation, Shiva swallowed Shukra, the guru of the Asuras. Shukra, by the way, is Venus. Andaka then launched an attack on Indra. Shiva intervened to save Indra and assaulted the demon with his trident. However, when Andaka's blood fell on the ground, a copy of him would spawn. Haha, this sounds very much like the story of Rakta Bija, the seed of desire, who, when you think you've gotten rid of one, all it does is multiply, which has a very profound psychological meaning. Vishnu created several matrikas to drink the blood of the demon every time he was hurt, preventing the spread of the new demons. So you see what these matrikas are. They're blood drinkers. And what they're drinking is the blood of the demons in order that, this blood actually is toxic, and it's meant to stem the tide of their power or their ignorant influence in this case. I feel like Andaka is a real embodiment or metaphor for ignorance here. Every time you start preventing the spread of new demons. Finally, Shiva managed to decapitate Andaka. According to Shiva Purana, in a twist of events, since Andaka had chanted Shiva's name in repentance, after which he was told of his biological parentage, and he was made a Gana chief. Okay, this is an example of one of those stories where, well, first of all, we see Shiva in his, merciful phase. Okay, we see that because Shiva is when you make Shiva angry, he is very, very destructive. But by the same token, if you throw yourself on Shiva's mercy, he will immediately revert to being merciful. So it's Shiva's quick to anger and quick to forgive. Let's put it that way. And Shiva. So in this case, we see that basically it's sort of once the Asura, once the demon recognizes his ignorance, then Shiva suddenly says, "Oh, okay." Then Shiva forgives him and grants him a place among his ganas, which are sort of his little, his little army, I suppose. Ganesha is actually the head of the ganas, and it's so this is a really stark. This stands in stark contrast to what we think about the divine and the demonic in Western culture. Now, some people might say, "Oh, yes, but Shiva's practicing forgiveness, which is a Christian virtue." Yeah, but just as God can practice forgiveness, perhaps. But you don't see that kind of forgiveness usually extended to demons. To humans, sure, but not to demons. Okay. But again, demons are different here. Demons are capable of growing, of maturing. That's the word I'm looking for. It is possible for a demon to outgrow its, what you might view as its selfishness or its ignorance or its greed. But frequently they don't. It's so embedded in their nature that they, and what they're calling ego is so strong, that desire that has to be about them, that they have to be right, that they're not going to yield. What I would call a very toxic masculine trait. Okay, that sense of not only might makes right, but the idea that I don't even care if I'm wrong. You're just going to I'm going to control the situation, and you're going to accept whatever I say. And if I want something, I'm not going to be swayed from it. Okay, so. But you may be asking at this point, okay, so, Breach, what does this have to do with Shivaduti? Well, okay. So, this is another source on Shaktism. From the Kamakoti Mandili. They mention Shivaduti is the name of Matrika Shakti created by Maharudra. Now, by the way, Maharudra is Shiva, another name of Shiva. Shiva, as you'll notice, has many names. In order to control the plague of demons created by Andaka. Okay? So this is their version of the story. Accordingly, Andaka Asura tried to kidnap Uma, who is Devi Parvati, and was fiercely attacked by Maharudra, who shot arrows at him from his Mahapinaka. When the arrows pierced the body of Andakasura, drops of his blood fell to the earth, and from those drops thousands of Andakas arose. To control this plague of demons, Maharudra created the Mahashaktis. And see, in the other version, it's Vishnu who does it, but in this, it's Shiva. And they said that they're kind of saying that's referring to Shivaduti, and ordered them to drink the blood of the demons and drain them dry. Okay, so so in this case, Shivaduti is more like the devouring jackal here. She's the one that's drinking the blood in the same way you see Kali with her long tongue. They're there to drink up the blood. So they sound almost vampiric, but they're not, because what they're doing is they are drying up the source of this toxicity, this poisonous element that creates destruction and greed and imbalance and things like that. So yeah, and another note here, it says Andakasura, after attempting to abduct Parvati, thus ensued a fierce battle between Andakasura and Rudra, the lord of Uma. Like Rakta Bija, every drop that fell created another Asura. Okay, and it's the same thing. Rudra created innumerable Matra Shaktis. So in this case, Shivaduti becomes a name for like this whole almost army of Shaktis in this particular version. But it's, and there is multiple versions of this Andaka story, but I don't want to sidetrack into those. but I just want to show you where Shivaduti fits in there. And this one, as you can see, there's somewhat of a similar script, although in this case, although in the Devi Mahatmayam, the Mahisasura, the great demon that controls the three worlds, desires to possess Durga, and that's what starts the battle. It's funny when you think about that. All of these cosmic wars that fight over the desire to possess the feminine, even the Trojan War, what was that over? Desire to possess Helen, who's queen of Sparta, and abducted by Paris. And even within the Iliad, the very opening scene where Achilles and Agamemnon have a falling out, it's over a mini battle over a woman, a concubine. So I don't know, just reflect on the idea of the wars started over the feminine, and I believe, and I don't feel it's just as superficial as, oh, she's beautiful and men are horny or something like that. It's definitely this idea of wanting to possess the feminine but not approaching it in the correct way, which is what I often say about the dark feminine. In Western culture, the way that masculine energies are, the way that men in particular, okay, if we just assume that men, just as women often have feminine traits projected onto them, men often have masculine traits projected onto them as well. Same thing happens. And men, as part of this cultural context, are told that the way to manage this kind of energy is in a way to kind of either conquer it or repress it, or if it's really bad, to exterminate it, right? But the idea that the male impulse has to have control over that female impulse. And this is almost an expression of the anima archetype too, in that the male desiring this female and going to these great lengths, regardless of whether they are rational or anything else, to possess. And that the desire to possess may have less to do with a love of the woman than it is just the desire for possession. Okay, so or power or control. So it's not so much about the other. So these become very metaphorical of this, and Shiva actually represents the masculinity in proper balance with its femininity. So again, this ends up being a battle not only with Shiva, but then also with all of these malevolent, supposedly malevolent manifestations of Shakti, which will cut down that masculine, that sort of arrogant masculine, I don't really care, I'm going to possess you, and tough tootie. So you have this dark feminine energy that pushes back against that kind of toxic masculine thinking. Okay. And I put it that way because I don't want people to think that I believe all masculine thinking is toxic. I don't. There's many traits of masculinity which are extremely important. But our focus here is on femininity and why there seems to be this temperamental, or temperamental is not the word really I'm looking for, this contentious relationship with the feminine, particularly the dark feminine. Okay. So that's the Andaka story. So let me go now and move to, I want to get my copy of the Chandi, which I have right here in book form. Don't want to knock my microphone over doing this. Okay, so in this particular part of Chandi, this is the battle of Shumba and Nishumba. Now, Shumba is translated in this as self-conceit, arrogance. Okay. And Nishumba would be, the not arrogant. In this case, it's saying not arrogance, but what it really means is self-depreciation. Oh, I'm not worthy. Oh, I'm a victim. Oh, look at poor me. I'm just a nobody. It's the rather insincere opposite, if you will. Because both are inflated forms of ego. Both are ways in which we either try to martyr ourselves, or the ways in which we puff ourselves up to be better than what we are. Now, that said, we do live in a society where we tend to, I think it's more about finding the balance of humility, recognizing that we all have good qualities and attributes to develop, but remaining humble about them, not it's fine to be motivated and to reach for the stars and say, hey, this is my goal. But at the same time, recognize that, you have your limitations as well. So that's, it kind of goes back to it does go back to the Greek idea of hubris, the idea that one thinks that they are better than what they are, or better than the gods in that particular case. Athena's a great weaver, but I'm better than she is, says Arachne. It's this idea that in my human powers, I'm somehow greater than the forces of the universe, and the forces of the universe generally strike back very hard to remind the person that no, in fact, they are not. So we're seeing that here. Okay, so in Chundi, we have them battling the Durga, and her army of Shaktis are fighting against Shumba and Nishumba. Now, at the point where we are in Chundi, where we talk about Shivaduti, and it's it's not a hugely long section, but it's might take a little bit, so bear with me here. Okay, so there's this battle between the Devi and self-depreciation. So here, I'm reading the translation, which sounds a little awkward at points, because it is. It says, thereafter that king of thought, self-depreciation, took a battle axe in his hands, but seeing him coming, the goddess let loose a multitude of arrows, and having wounded him, she put him to rest in the earth. Now, let me just be clear here. She didn't kill him. She put him to rest in the earth, which means she basically knocked him unconscious. After self-depreciation was laid to rest on the earth, his extremely fierce brother, who is Shumba, self-conceit, was greatly agitated, and he approached to kill the mother of the universe. Seated on his chariot, he was displaying magnificent weapons with his 8 mighty arms, and he covered the entire atmosphere with his wonderful brilliance. Seeing him approaching, the goddess sounded her conch and made excessively unbearable noise along with the twang of her bowstring. The sound of her bell, which destroys the splendor of all thoughts, pervaded in all directions. Thereafter the lion gave a roar. This is Durga's lion, the goddess's lion, hearing which even the greatest of kings of elephants lost their pride, and the hum of the roar filled the earth, the atmosphere, and the 10 directions. Thus the remover of darkness leaped into the atmosphere, and with her 2 hands she slapped the earth. From this there was such an excessive noise that all the preceding sounds became quiet. Thereafter, now here's the translation of Shivaduti. She for whom consciousness is emissary. Shivaduti is literally the messenger, either the messenger of Shiva or one who has Shiva as a messenger. But here they're referring to it as she who has consciousness as an emissary. Gave a great horse laugh to the displeasure of the thoughts. And hearing this, all the thoughts began to shudder. Self-conceit was greatly agitated. The goddess, meaning Shivaduti, said to self-conceit, O wicked one, stand fast. And then the voice of the gods rose in the atmosphere, victory to you, which is Jaya. They said Jaya. That's why you often hear Jaya, Jaya, or Jai Ma, victory to the mother. As self-conceit was advancing, he thrust an extremely fearful luminous energy, which was coming out like a mountain of fire, and the goddess, with the great flame of fire, put it away. So she fights fire with fire here. The atmosphere of the 3 worlds was pervaded by the lion-like cry of self-conceit, but of even greater volume was the frightful clap of thunder that conquered all other sounds. Self-conceit and the goddess cut one another's arrows in hundreds and thousands. Then the enraged she who tears apart thought struck him with the pike, and wounded he fell to the ground, senseless. So this battle goes on. I don't necessarily need to read all of these, but I do want to read the rest of what has to do with Shivaduti. So they're going back and forth and back and forth. And finally, as self-depreciation, the afflictor of the gods, approached with a pike in the hand, she who tears apart thought swiftly pierced him in the heart with her own pike. Emerging from the heart pierced by the pike came a spirit of great strength and valor, crying, Stop! With loud laughter, the goddess severed his head with her sword, and he fell to the ground. Now, by the way, severing the head is the removal of the ego. It's the removal of the way in which thoughts interfere with the flow of things. Then the lion crushed the necks of many thoughts with his fierce teeth and ate them, while the remover of darkness and she for whom consciousness is emissary, Shivaduti, devoured others. So if you recall, in the beginning of this episode, I mentioned Shivaduti taking, having a voice like jackals, and that her jackals were actually going to devour the armies of Shumba, the self-conceit. And so here, this is where we see this happening, okay, where he does battle with the great Devi, who usually is, I mean, again, the various names may be put forward. Usually we think of the great Devi here as Durga, okay. She's portrayed as riding on a tiger or a lion, and she comes in with her matrikas, with the mothers, the matrika shaktis, who come in and destroy these demons who are actually representative of thoughts. Now, stop and think about that for a moment. The idea that these are thoughts, okay? When you think about human psychology and the way in which we have thoughts that we cannot control, one of the funniest things I always think is people who practice, say, law of attraction or, positivity or positive thinking, what they fail to take into account with this system, I mean, yes, because you can sit down every day and you can have affirmations every day. They're kind of like mantras. Get up and say, I'm sorry, I keep thinking of the Saturday Night Live joke with, I think it was Al Franken who played him, actually. He played Stuart Smalley. Was it him, or am I getting him mixed up with somebody else? I think it was him. Looking in the mirror and going, I'm good enough, I'm smart enough, and gosh darn it, people like me. I keep thinking about that, and I'm not trying to diss people who do affirmations. Affirmations can be helpful, but it's ridiculous to think, and I know many people in holistic practice who seem to think that everything is controlled by your thoughts, and why are you thinking this way, and why you're making yourself sick because you have this thought. Now, you don't have any control over that thought. That thought, it's back to the idea that they have that when you think you've exorcised the devil from you, or the devil's just only gotten hold of you. So if you think I'm just going to affirm my way into this bad thinking going away, it's not. You may go through a period of time where you feel better and say, see, I got rid of that. But it always sneaks back in some form. And Shivaduti, to me, as serving the role of emissary or messenger, I feel like that's somebody, when somebody's getting too big for their britches, as you might say, it's like Shivaduti is appearing as a warning. Like, might want to rethink that. Might want to, might want to be careful of acting on thoughts. You really can't prevent thoughts. The only thing you can change really is action. People are going to think what they're going to think. And if you practice meditation, that, this notion of I'm going to empty my head of all thoughts is ridiculous. I mean, you can't. The best you can do is step back and watch your thoughts, is to detach yourself from judgments about those thoughts or preferences about those thoughts. I like this, I don't like that. It's very hard for us to do. And, you'll read that and they'll say, well, if you just did that. Yeah, but it's not an easy thing to do. And that's something we frequently beat ourselves up. Oh, I shouldn't think this way. And oh, I shouldn't. Well, you do. That's the bottom line is that you do. And the first step towards actually, that the reason you have the feminine influence is that to a certain degree, there has to be an acceptance that this is how you think, and there has to be a yielding to it. Because when you yield something, that's the same as sort of the goddess pushing back with her energy. Because the way that the feminine fights is through actually kind of like the martial art of avoidance. It's there may be when those particular forces that we'll archetypally call masculine and feminine come into contact with each other. The feminine wins by pulling away at the right time or yielding at the right time. You don't fight thoughts by saying, I'm going to fight this thought with another thought. That may have a short-term effect, but it's just going to be an endless battle between you and that. At some point, there has to be an acceptance, there has to be a yielding, and there has to be an integration. Because if you don't have that, because ultimately what you're going to find, I mean, they're slaying all of these demons, but Durga says, well, they're all going to come back again. And they're not going to permanently go away. This is not how things happen. And they're there for a reason. But they're not representations of ultimate evil. They're representations of the kind of thinking that throws us off balance, that creates suffering because we're chasing after the wrong kinds of things often. There's certain things that we want for ourselves, and we go after them in such a manner that we don't necessarily think about. I mean, we think about ourselves, and we're kind of trained not necessarily to think about the community around us. So that would be having the masculine and feminine balance. Yes, you want to, fulfill your goals and ambitions, say, but you also want to share and give back to the society that you're in as well. That would be the ideal balance. Okay, and these Asuras, these demons, represent the times when people get out of balance. They lust for power, they lust for control, they want to control other people, whether it be these male demons trying to control female goddesses or to possess them, or whether it's just, I want military or civil control over everything, and I want to be the most powerful guy and everybody will obey me. That's when you start to run into trouble. That's where these demons create trouble, where they use the powers they have to just selfishly take control and to oppress others. So, okay, not to fall too far, but this is where we see Shivaduti come in. That is the importance there. Now, let me just talk about her as a yogini. First of all, what is a yogini? Okay. Now, in one sense, a yogini is a tantric practitioner. And in both Tantric Buddhism and Hinduism, you see yoginis who are sometimes teachers. But in this particular case, we're referring to it with a yogini as an aspect of the Devi, D-E-V-I, which is a catch-all term for all aspects of the goddess. Now here, it says here, Wikipedia, the 11th century collection of myths called the Katasarit Sagara, a yogini is one of a class of females with magical powers. Sorceress is sometimes enumerated as 8, 60, 64, or 65. Okay. And in this case, we're talking about the 64. Now, there's something called the Kali Yogini Tantra that I have a translation of, and I just want to read a little bit from this about the idea of 64 yoginis. Again, it's a translation, and it's not the translation of the whole document. But this is supposed to be Mother Kali. Let me just see, the Cosmic Mother is the way they say it. Seeking the darshan of the Great Mother. Darshan being an audience with. And so Mother Kali, after she's finished destroying the world, develops a great love for humanity. And she finally speaks. And she says, "O great ones, if I am known, what need is there for pilgrimage, austerities, and even sadhana itself? If I am revealed, what use is puja, tantra, kriya, yoga, and the inspired texts? My mystery is grand and broad and expansive beyond the consciousness of humanity, yet I am ever accessible as the cosmic lover beyond the thinking mind. It is I who is the source of peace, light, love, and power, as they are all hallmarks of my essence. This is the essence of my Kali Yogini Tantra." Okay. I am the polarities of space and polarities and the space between them. The forces of creation are none other than my divine nature in union with her Lord. Manifesting in both celestial and terrestrial planes, pretending to be limited as a human incarnation, I feign intoxication with all aspects of life. I manifest before sincere tantrics so that Shiva and Shakti, secretly embodied as humans, may know Shiva and Shakti as their intimate lover in every sphere and dimension. Thus I am always in oneness, and yet I seek oneness as well. I take on human incarnation in order that all less conscious manifestations might discover their divinity through relationship. And by the way, when she says this, she's talking about incarnating in all humans. In doing so, I provide an avenue for humanity to taste the nectar of immortality through my Kola Tantra. Even given this, my true nature still remains secret. I live hidden in the bodies of human lovers and friends, promoting the elevation of consciousness for those who seek it through me. Okay. I assume the form of the 8 ancient mothers, the Ashtamatrikas, through whom I have given birth to the greatest secrets of Tantra. I pulsate within the spiritual heart of the 10 great mothers of wisdom, the Mahavidyas, and reside in the divine lunar expression of all Lalita's forms. Manifesting as the Sharir Yoginis, I live within the bodies of all men and women. I am the Nitya Shaktis, representing every phase of the lunar light. Each and all are my own distinct entities. My Nityas uniquely manifest with the waning and waxing of the moon. Like the moon itself, which is synchronistic as a planetary body, some of my forms appear light and some dark, according to the cycles of time and divisions of cosmic law. Each addresses the changes in gunas and variants of bhava required by humanity. As my primary form of Kali, the great black-limbed one, my darkness is feared by the masses, but never by those who seek to expunge the ego and achieve the highest realms of light. They do not fear that darkness, as that is merely a temporary surface apparel in my dance of changing form and time. And that's pretty important there. The darkness is a form, and those who seek to it's probably a better way to put it. I don't like to expunge the ego and realms of light. That sounds too dualistic to me. It's more in the sense of who seek to really integrate all of that appropriately. And I think that's actually what's meant here, in the way, it's just the way it's been translated. But but this is it. For those who seek to realize divinity in darkness, I am the solitary key. And there you go. There's the divine feminine right there, the dark feminine. Those with a pure heart fully surrendered to divine will do not fear the death of the ego, as it long since perished. As devotees approach me closer, they find me increasing light even in my dark forms, and like a mirror, I reflect their inner experience. Okay, so the 64 yoginis. This is the last part I want to read. Each of my 64 eternities are attendants to my own being. My 64 forms have the power to manifest from the body of other yoginis. Thus, as a group, we are all one and with the power of regeneration. As Mahakalyani, I am both each of them and all of them, even though each of them is self-contained eternity. As the 64 eternities, I reside in the very body and being of both the Bhakta and the Yani. Look for me not outside thyself, but in the multiplicity of Vedantic duality and illusion, Divine One. I have always resided within. Accept my grace and assistance from thy very self, and then discover, as the Siddhantis did, that I manifest true in all creation. Vedanta and Siddhanta both are correct in their sphere, for the flower is not the soil, nor the soil the flower. Now, she does say, she also makes a discussion here about, which I'm trying to find it, she talks about, I saw this in here, but slaying of Rakta Bija, which we've already talked about. I'm just, okay. Okay, here we go. But this is the line I was looking for. My 64 yogini forms are none other than the Kala Chakra, or the Wheel of Time. Okay. So the yoginis are representing different aspects. So in this case, she's talking about them as representing different aspects of time. We talk about the universe existing in the realm of time and space. And this is, so the idea of the yoginis as representing time and the wheel of time, and the way in which we experience that. So she says, there's no inauspicious time to worship me, and no direction inappropriate to face divine love is required. When devotion is not present, let sincerity be the doorway to my cosmic love. Meditate on any of my forms brings the expanded consciousness and spiritual freedom. Okay, so we see yoginis there in terms of their relationship. They are manifestations of the Shakti, or the Adi Parashakti, the supreme primal feminine energy, and they are representations of this within time. So Shivaduti represents this, and when we see her role, her emissary role, in this, and the way in which she appears in this form, in this jackal form. Now that's the next thing I want to talk about. Actually, is the jackal. It's the idea of this yogini who is, she's there really to free people from the thoughts that make them obsessive, or that lead them into just absolute, blundering ignorance. That this is her, or conceit, or, all of these things. Shivaduti is there along with the others to fight against this. And her specific role is that of emissary or messenger, to bring, and Shiva, in some Shiva is her messenger, and, but she is bringing the message of, change that way of thinking, or else you're going to be devoured by jackals. So what does that mean? Okay. So one of the great things about the jackal in Hindu mythology, he's one of the protectors of Shiva. And like the tiger, the jackal is a territorial and fierce animal. Now, Shivaduti is not the only deity associated with the jackal, we also have Chamunda. Chamunda, if she's not riding on a corpse, she's riding on a jackal. So there's definitely this fierce association. So what can we say about jackals here? I found an idea. I have this article on symbols.com about the symbol of the jackal in various religions and mythologies. And they mention the god Anubis, the Egyptian god Anubis, who presided over mummification and judged the moral worth of the dead, at least later on in Egyptian thinking. He was frequently depicted with the head of a jackal. The association was so strong that during the mummification process, it was not uncommon for a presiding priest to wear a jackal head mask as an invocation of this god. While the Egyptians seem to have he says, for lack of a better word, an amiable relationship with the jackal, other cultures were not so open to the creatures. In some cases, for the very same reason, the Egyptians revered them, which is their strong association with death. Jackals and other wild beasts often appear in the Old Testament of the Bible as symbols of desolation. Hinduism associates the jackal with Kali, goddess of death and destruction, and in this case specifically with Shivaduti. In Kali's case, or Shivaduti, greater emphasis is put on the latter capacity than the former, the ongoing connection with death clearly being played out in the jackal's symbolic meaning. Okay, so the jackal's association with death. So Shivaduti comes to threaten death, basically. I'm warning you. And here they says the association of the jackal with death probably stemmed from a relatively straightforward observation of the animal. In addition to being skilled hunters, jackals also scavengers who feed on the bodies of dead animals. And in that capacity, they frequented graveyards and other locations where corpses were found. From there, it was no great leap to connect the creature with the dead in either a negative or positive fashion. So, now where else do we see this? Well, for example, if you see animals like the crow, for example, which is associated with goddesses like the Morrigan. What is the crow? And the Morrigan's also associated with death, particularly on the battlefield. And where do we see that? Crows are also scavengers. You see them, picking things apart and, taking the meat off of dead carcasses. So any animal that does that becomes associated with these deities of destruction, decay, and in this case, there's no exception here. Now, the fact that the jackal also serves that protective role, which again is not, they say the jackal is a protector of Shiva, but also has this death association. So it's basically, in a way, this almost is like a threat from the protector of Shiva. Okay? There's this definitely very strong divine feminine image. So of the devout, the feminine that devours but also protects. So Shivaduti is very much an embodiment of that. And there is the sense that she is at least as powerful as Shiva in her way of doing things. And the fact that she can send Shiva as her emissary is quite suggestive as well. But there it is. There's you might have called it almost the premonition of death. Self-conceit is approached, in theory, by either Shivaduti or by Shiva himself, depending on, different versions and how you want to interpret that. She comes to say, you need to stop what you're doing now, otherwise the jackals will feast on you. Okay, so you are going to be, and then of course she also serves a role of drinking up the blood of the multiplying demon, the demon that multiplies through the drops of blood. So, so there, again, there's that idea of putting a stop, acting as that agent. Now, in the West, we tend to see that kind of stop motion. We associate that with angels in the Old Testament who serve the function of Satan. Okay, now when I say that, that might be a strange thing, but Satan is really more of a role than it is a being, at least in the Old Testament. So Book of Job being a perfect example, the Satan, this particular deity who is, who patrols the world, comes back to Yahweh and says, oh yeah, this guy Job, he's really great. And Yahweh says, yeah, isn't he great? He's really great to me. And he's like, I'll bet I could make him curse your name. Ha ha, you're on. It's that's pretty much how that goes down. But in this case, Satan's not the enemy of God that he's going to smite down. Satan's like the guy who, he's like a trickster. We have a bet. Go ahead, mess him up and see if he'll curse my name. And then when Job, after suffering, has the nerve to question God, then Yahweh's like, well, who do you think you are? So it's an interesting kind of a thing. But there's another example of a Satan in the Old Testament, and that's in the book of Numbers, when there's the story of, I don't have the name. It's Numbers 23, and I don't have it open in front of me right now. But there's a story of a sorcerer who was asked to curse the Israelites, and but then Yahweh appears to him and tells him, of course, not to do that. But then he's spurred on by something, and he's going to this town to perform this deed. I can't remember if he's meeting with someone or if he is actually going to cast his spell or make his prophecy or whatever he's going to do. And he's with his donkey, but his donkey keeps falling down or shying away, and or stopping. And he keeps trying to beat the beast to make him go forward. But what it is it's an angel with a flaming sword standing in front of the donkey, and the donkey, of course, but he can't see it. I want to say his name is his name Balaam? I think that's the name, is Balaam. Yeah, it's Balaam and the donkey. That's what I'm remembering it is. And so he goes, and so he continually beats the donkey, and finally the donkey gets a voice and says, why do you keep beating me? And finally he's able to see the angel, because the angel's telling him, no, Yahweh does not want you to go and do this. Go back and do this instead. Go back and tell them that you're going to bless the Israelites, which of course makes the opposing tribe very angry. But that angel is known as a Satan. That is one that stands in the way. And that's where I see Shivaduti's role, the one who stands in the way and says, stop. You better stop what you're doing, otherwise what you're going to face is death. Similarly, in those cases, stop what you're doing, or what you're going to face is destruction. And of course, because you're dealing with demons of arrogance, they're like, yeah, I'm not going to stop. And so they keep going, and then what happens? They get their head cut off, they're annihilated, and all their blood's drank. So, just some interesting thoughts and comparisons there. But it goes to show you that, that which obstructs you, or that which tries to warn you, even if it's not what you want to hear, is that's not always to your detriment. A lot of times that's actually to your benefit and to your preservation. So, some things to think about. Okay, that's all I'm going to say on Shivaduti. Thank you so much again for listening. Please visit Chthonia.net, which is the page containing the information about this podcast, current episodes of this podcast, and also information about publications that I have. I have another other services link there as well that links to my sister site, liminalreiki.com, which is more of the individual one-on-one work that I do with people in dealing with transition, loss, fear, things like that. And you can check that out. And Reiki is just one of the tools that I use, probably an highly identifiable one, but I use other things to help people through sort of individual crises, experiences of I'm facing the void, I don't know where I'm going next, and that kind of thing. If you want to support my work, both my writing, my podcasting, and my teaching, please visit patreon.com/Chthonia. I have a number of patrons already who I want to, some have been around a while, some who are newer, and I want to say thank you to all of you. Your help and support is appreciated and helps me, helps me do all the things I need to do to finance this podcast and being able to move ahead with other projects. So your work is very much your donations are very much appreciated, and your continued support of what I'm doing. If you want to follow me on social media, please check out Chthonia Podcast. It's 2 words on Facebook, 1 word on Instagram and Twitter, and also just Chthonia on YouTube, which might be where you're watching this, but if you're listening to this in audio only, then you can check out the video version there. That's it for this time. See you in the next episode. Hinduism, you see yoginis who are sometimes teachers,